Passage here from a letter to Dr. Johnson from Mr. Boswell, Edinburgh, February 20th, 1776. You have illuminated my mind and relieved me from imaginary shackles of conscientious obligation. Were it necessary, I could immediately join in an entail upon the series of heirs approved by my father, but it is better not to act too suddenly. Dr. Johnson to Mr. Boswell. Dear Sir, I am glad that what I could think of say has at all contributed to quiet your thoughts. Your resolution not to act till your opinion is confirmed by more deliberation is very just. If you had been scrupulous, do not now be rash. I hope that as you think more and take opportunities of talking with men intelligent in questions of property, you will be able to free yourself from every difficulty. When I wrote last, I sent, I think, 10 packets. Did you receive them all? You must tell Mrs. Boswell that I suspected her to have written without your knowledge, and therefore I did not return any answer, lest a clandestine correspondence should have been perniciously discovered. I will write to her soon. I am, dear sir, most affectionately yours, February 24th, 1776, Sam Johnson. Footnote here that says, a letter to him on the interesting subject of the family settlement, which I had read. It's a letter from Mrs. Boswell to Johnson. Having communicated to Lord Hailes what Dr. Johnson wrote concerning the questions which perplexed me so much, his lordship wrote to me, your scruples have produced more fruit than I ever expected from them. An excellent dissertation on general principles of morals and law. I wrote to Dr. Johnson on the 20th of February, complaining of melancholy. Actually, the 29th of February, the footnote tells us. And expressing a strong desire to be with him, informing him that the 10 packets came all safe, that Lord Hailes was much obliged to him, and said he had almost wholly removed his scruples against entails, whatever that means. To James Boswell, Esquire. Dear Sir, I have not had your letter half an hour. As you lay so much weight upon my notions, I should think it not just to delay my answer. I am very sorry that your melancholy should return, and should be sorry likewise if it could have no relief from company. My counsel you may have when you are pleased to require it, but of my company you cannot in the next month have much, for Mr. Thrale will take me to Italy, he says, on the 1st of April. Let me warn you very earnestly against scruples. I am glad that you are reconciled to your settlement, and think it a great honour to have shaken Lord Hailes' opinion of entails. Entails versus scruples, that's what it's all about, I guess. Do not, however, hope wholly to reason away your troubles. Do not feed them with attention, and they will die imperceptibly away. Fix your thoughts upon your business. Fill your intervals with company, and sunshine will again break in upon your mind. If you will come to me, you must come very quickly. And even then I know not but we may scour the country together. For I have a mind to see Oxford and Lichfield before I set out on this long journey. To this I can only add that I am, dear sir, your most affectionate humble servant, March 5th, 1776, Sam Johnson. To the same. Dear sir, very early in April we leave England, and in the beginning of the next week I shall leave London for a short time. Of this I think it necessary to inform you, that you may not be disappointed in any of your enterprises. I have not fully resolved to go into the country before this day. Please to make my compliments to Lord Hailes, and mention very particularly to Mrs. Boswell my hope that she is reconciled to, Sir, your faithful servant, March 12, 1776, Sam Johnson. About 30 years ago, the heirs of Lord Chancellor Clarendon presented the University of Oxford with the continuation of his history, and such others of his lordship's manuscripts as had not been published on condition that the profit arising from their publication should be applied to the establishment of a menage in the university. The gift was accepted in full convocation. A person, footnote here tells us this is Mr. Carter, being now recommended to Dr. Johnson as fit to superintend this proposed writing school, he exerted himself with that zeal for which he was remarkable upon every similar occasion. But on inquiry into the matter, he found that the scheme was not likely to be soon carried into execution, the profits arising from the Clarendon press being, from some mismanagement, very scanty. This having been explained to him by respectable dignity of the church, footnote here tells us this is Dr. John Douglas, who had good means of knowing it, he wrote a letter upon the subject, which at once exhibited his extraordinary precision and acuteness in his warm attachment to his alma mater. To the Reverend Dr. Wetherell, Master of University College, Oxford. Dear Sir, few things are more unpleasant than the transaction of business with men who are above knowing or caring what they have to do. Such as the trustees for Lord Cornbury's institution will perhaps appear when you have read Dr. Boswell's copy at Yale had the name Douglas in it. Letter. So it's Dr. Blank here, but it's Dr. Douglas's letter. The last part of the doctor's letter is of great importance. The complaint, footnote here from Boswell, I suppose the complaint was that the trustees of the Oxford Press did not allow the London booksellers a sufficient profit upon vending their publications. The complaint which he makes I have heard long ago, and did not know, but it was redressed. It is unhappy that a practice so erroneous has not yet been altered. For altered it must be, or our press will be useless, with all its privileges. The booksellers, who, like all other men, have strong prejudices in their own favor, are enough inclined to think the practice of printing and selling books by and but themselves an encroachment on the rights of their fraternity, and having need of stronger inducements to circulate academical publications than those of one another, for on the mutual cooperation by which the general trade is carried on, the university can bear no part. Of those whom he neither loves nor fears, and from whom he expects no reciprocation of good offices, why should any man promote the interest not but for profit? I suppose with all our scholastic ignorance of mankind, we are still too knowing to expect that the booksellers will erect themselves into patrons, and buy and sell under the influence of a disinterested zeal for the promotion of learning. To the booksellers, if we look for either honor or profit from our press, not only their common profit, but something more must be allowed. And if books printed at Oxford are expected to be rated at high price, that price must be levied on the public and paid by the ultimate purchaser, not by the intermediate agents. What price shall be set upon the book is, to the booksellers, wholly indifferent, provided that they gain a proportionate profit by negotiating the sale. Why books printed at Oxford should be particularly dear, I am, however, unable to find. We pay no rent. We inherit many of our instruments and materials. Lodging and victuals are cheaper than at London, and therefore workmanship ought, at least, not to be dearer. Our expenses are naturally less than those of booksellers, and in most cases communities are content with less profits than individuals. It is perhaps not considered through how many hands a book often passes before it comes into those of the reader, or what parts of the profit each hand must retain as a motive for transmitting it to the next. We will call our primary agent in London, Mr. Caldwell, who receives our books from us, gives them room in his warehouse, and issues them on demand. By him they are sold to Mr. Dilly, a wholesale bookseller, who sends them into the country, and the last seller is the country bookseller. Here are three profits to be paid between the printer and the reader, or in the style of commerce, between the manufacturer and the consumer, and if any of these profits is too perniciously distributed, penuriously, you know what I mean, penuriously, distributed, the process of commerce is interrupted or intercepted. We are now come to the practical question, what is to be done? You will tell me with reason that I have said nothing, till I declare how much, according to my opinion, of the ultimate price ought to be distributed through the whole succession of sale. The deduction, I am afraid, will appear very great, but let it be considered before it is refused. We must allow for profit between 30 and 35%, between 6 and 7 shillings to the pound. That is, for every book which costs the last buyer 20 shillings, we must charge Mr. Caldwell with something less than 14. We must set the copies at 14 shillings each and superadd what is called the quarterly book, or for every 100 books so charged we must deliver 104. The profits will then stand thus. Mr. Cattle, who runs no hazard and gives no credit, will be paid for warehouse room and attendance by a shilling profit on each book, and his chance of the quarterly book. Mr. Dilly, who buys the books for 15 shillings and who will expect the quarterly book if he takes 5 and 20, will send it to his country customer at 16 and 6, by which, at the hazard of loss and the certainty of loss of long credit, he gains the regular profit of 10%, which is expected in the wholesale trade. The country bookseller, buying at 16 and 6 and commonly trusting a considerable time, gains but 3 and 6 pence, and if he trusts a year, not much more than 2 and 6 pence. Otherwise, then, as he may perhaps take as long credit as he gives. With less profit than this, and more you can see he cannot have, the country bookseller cannot live, for his receipts are small and his debt sometimes bad. Thus, dear sir, I have been incited by the doctor's letter to give you a detail of the circulation of books, which perhaps every man has not had opportunity of knowing, and which those who know it do not perhaps always distinctly consider. I am, etc., March 12, 1776, Sam Johnson. Footnote here from Boswell. I am happy in giving this full and clear statement to the public to vindicate, by the authority of the greatest author of his age, that respectable body of men, the booksellers of London, from vulgar reflections, as if their profits were exorbitant, when in truth Dr. Johnson has here allowed them more than they usually demand. Well, that's interesting. The publishing rights and capitalism back then for books. It's kind of cool. Having arrived in London late on Friday, the 15th of March, I hastened next morning to wait on Dr. Johnson at his house, but found he was removed from Johnson's Court, number 7, to Bolt Court, number 8, still keeping to his favorite Fleet Street. My reflection at the time upon this change, as marked in my journal, is as follows. I quote, I felt a foolish regret that he had left the court which bore his name. He said when in Scotland that he was Johnson of that ilk. But it was not foolish to be affected with some tenderness of regard for a place in which I had seen him a great deal, from whence I had often issued a better and happier man than when I went in, and which had often appeared to my imagination while I trod its pavement in the solemn darkness of that night, to be sacred to wisdom and piety. Being informed that he was at Mr. Thrale's in the Borough, I hastened thither, and found Mrs. Thrale and him at breakfast. I was kindly welcomed. In a moment he was in full glow of conversation, and I felt myself elevated as if brought into another state of being. Mrs. Thrale and I looked to each other while he talked, and our looks expressed our congenial admiration and affection for him. I shall ever recollect this scene with great pleasure. I exclaimed to her, I am now intellectually hermippus rendivus, restored. I am quite restored by him, by transfusion of mind. There are many, she replied, who admire and respect Mr. Johnson, but you and I love him. He seemed very happy in the near prospect of going to Italy with Mr. and Mrs. Thrale. But, said Johnson, before leaving England I am to take a jaunt to Oxford, Birmingham, my native city, Lichfield, and my old friend Dr. Taylor's at Ashburn in Derbyshire. I shall go in a few days, and you, Boswell, shall go with me. I was ready to accompany him, being willing even to leave London to have the pleasure of his conversation. I mentioned with much regret the extravagance of the representative. Footnote here says this is Norman MacLeod, 20th Chief of MacLeod, of a great family in Scotland, by which there was danger of it being ruined. And as Johnson respected it for its antiquity, he joined with me in thinking it would be happy if this person should die. Mrs. Thrale seemed shocked at this as feudal barbarity, and said, I do not understand this preference of the estate to its owner, of the land to the man who walks upon that land. Johnson answered, Nay, madame, it is not a preference of the land to its owner, it is the preference of a family to an individual. Here is an establishment in a country which is of importance for ages, not only to the chief but to his people, an establishment which extends upwards and downwards. That this should be destroyed by one idle fellow is a sad thing. Amen. I'll drink my tea to that. He said, Entails are good because it is good to preserve in a country series of men to whom the people are accustomed to look up to their leaders. And now we have proof here that entails in this language means kind of your hereditary gaining of property. But I am for leaving a quantity of land and commerce to excite industry and keep money in the country. For if no land were to be bought in a country, there would be no encouragement to acquire wealth, because a family could not be founded there. Or if it were acquired, it must be carried away to another country where land may be bought. And although the land in every country will remain the same and be as fertile where there is no money as where there is, yet all that portion of the happiness of civil life which is produced by money circulating in a country would be lost. I said to this, Then, sir, would it be for the advantage of a country that all its lands were sold at once? Johnson answered, So far, sir, as money produces good, it would be an advantage, for then that country would have as much money circulating in it as it is worth. But to be sure, this would be counterbalanced by disadvantages attending a total change of proprietors. I express my opinion that the power of entailing should be limited thus, that there should be 1/3 or perhaps 1/2 of the land of a country kept free from commerce, that the proportion allowed to be entailed should be parceled out so that no family could entail above a certain quantity. Let a family, according to the abilities of its representatives, be richer or poorer in different generations, or always rich if its representatives be always wise. But let its absolute permanency be moderate. In this way we should be certain of there being always a number of established roots, and as in the course of nature there is in every age an extinction of some families, there would be continual opening for men ambitious of perpetuity to plant a stock in the entail ground. Footnote here. The privilege of perpetuating in a family an estate and arm indefeasibly from generation to generation is enjoyed by none of His Majesty's subjects except in Scotland, where the legal fiction of fine and recovery is unknown. It is a privilege so proud that I should think it would be proper to have the exercise of it dependent on the royal prerogative. It seems absurd to permit the power of perpetuating their representation to men who, having had no eminent merit, have truly no name. The king, as the impartial father of his people, would never refuse to grant the privilege to those who deserve it. Yeah, okay. Johnson answered, why so mankind will be better able to regulate the system of entails when the evil of too much land being locked up to them is felt than we can do at present when it is not felt. Oh, it's already 20 minutes. Well, that's enough for today then. Till next time, bye from Boswell. Ta-ta.